Good morning, everybody. Well, welcome to Report Lunch on social media accountability in the 2022 Philippine election. I know that's a while ago, but we just finished the report. Thank you for coming. My name is Ploy Chandrasert, Director of Digital Reach. Thank you so much for coming here today. We are going to start talking about the importance of this research before we dive into it. And this research is also part of the Southeast Asian Coalition on Tech Accountability, or the CAC Coalition. Some of you might know about it already. This coalition was formed in 2021 and 2021, and it's part and this research is actually part of the 5 research series on social media accountability in Southeast Asian election. We are going to learn about this research in the Philippine election for about 30 minutes, just to briefly tell you about the itinerary again. But I think that coming here, you know about this already. After that, I will invite the speaker, the commentator, to talk about the situation for about like 5 minutes before we end the event with Q&A. And today I have Fatima Gaw. She's an expert on social media accountability in the Philippines and is a key individual for the Digital Public Pulse project launched in 2021. We documented public discourse in the Philippine digital public sphere during the 2022 Philippine election. Here with me is also Jose Marie Lanuza, who's expert on the situation on information disorder in the Philippines, and his latest work, from disinformation to influence operation, the evolution of disinformation in 3 electoral cycle in the Philippines, was just published in June this year, right? Okay. And also I have invited Celine Sampson from Verifast here as well. Celine is the head of the Verifast Facebook fact check team. So she's a fact checking expert. Verifast work has been really amazing, and particularly during the election period. And we hear these stories have learned a lot from the Verifast as well. So okay. We're gonna post the house rule here and in the chat box. If you have any questions that want to ask me and the commentator during the webinar, please post in the Q&A box and we will review them later. The house rule is already in the chat box, right? Okay. And if you have any questions in terms of the event itself, you can ask in the chat box, and our communication officer, who's working as a background moderator here, she'll be happy to answer it. Thank you so much. Okay, let's start. This research was actually initiated in 2021. Let me share the screen. All right. Okay. This research was actually initiated in 2021 as the Philippine election was going to be in May 2022. It was after 6 years under the administration of Rodrigo Duterte, and we have learned many things that happened as a result of social media being weaponized. It was widely documented that Duterte won because of social media, and his diehard supporters were created to defend him and his administration and to harass his critic as well. So social media was used to justify his red tagging campaign, where people have been falsely branded as communists, resulted in them being harassed or even murder. We have seen that the situation of social media was weaponized in the 2016 election, and it has definitely become like a playbook for the elections now, as observed as well in the previous midterm election 2019 and 2022. The latest presidential election was interesting because it was Marcos Jr., Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who contested for the highest office. And the attempt to whitewash the brutality of his father regime have been documented long before the 2022 election happened. Therefore, we wanted to see what social media platform, how social media platform would handle this situation actually. And we have had a lot of hiccups actually. And the main struggle was how to actually gather the data and present it in the best way possible, since we almost have no idea what would happen. But therefore, anyway, here is the methodology that I wanted to share with you. So in this research, we actually chose for social media platform, due to their popularity in the Philippines, as well as the way that they have been used. So these social media platform are Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. We call this Twitter because at that time during the Philippine election, the platform wasn't rebranded as X yet. So here we will refer to them as Twitter here. We use a mixed approach of research methodology. In this case, it's a combination of secondary sources, interview, and researcher observation. Each section is different though. We're trying to do like what would be the best way to actually gather the information and use different approaches throughout the whole report. The report starts with the background first. Oh, by the way, can you please put the report link in the chat box so that people can download it? Thank you so much, Pat. All right. So the report starts with the background first, and that's when we use a lot of secondary sources to mainly talk about the brutality and corruption of the Marcos Senior regime. We'll talk about the regime later, briefly about this because it's quite important. Sources that we use are for the context. Sources that we use for the context are usually compared to each other for accuracy, and we carefully choose sources that are non-partisan. We also look at the effort of social media platforms that were announced for the elections. All information is from the official sources. And then we look at the tactics of what really happened and the narrative of the problematic narrative that are disseminated across platform during the election. For the tactic, it was still secondary sources as they are key study about the tactics. Regarding the key narrative, actually, that went viral across the platform, we examined the database of fact-checking initiative and organization, which are CheckPH and Rappler. We use CheckPH because it's a collaborative fact-checking project for the 2022 Philippine election that comprised at least 34 partner entities working together, including Virovas. Yeah, and also there's AFP as well. The period of which the organization examined the database were from January 9 to June 8, 2022, which was actually the election period. According to the commissions on election, I refer to it here as COMELEC. So it's actually according to the COMELEC resolution number 10695, which promulgated in February 2021. The key part, which is the analysis, the highlight of the report, which is the gap in the social media effort that were announced before the election and what really happened. So we compare the two elements together. So in this part, we use a lot of research observation to compare with what happened in reality and the effort that social media announced prior to the election, based on the human rights approach. So let's take a look at this first. I'm not going to go into much detail because the highlight will be for the analysis, but I'll go briefly on this. In order to help the audience understand, because I know that uh many of the audience here are also not Filipino, and also just new to the issues of social media accountability. So for the social media platform effort, so before the election happened, all of the four social media platform announced their effort period to the election. And we actually categorize them into four categories, which are directing audiences to authoritative information, removing content, banning political ads, or improving its transparency, and digital literacy and public engagement. So first, with the directing audiences to authoritative information. So basically, Twitter, Meta, TikTok, they partner with Comelec to direct them, to direct the user to the Comelec official website or its partner website in order to provide the user with authoritative information. Basically, it's about like whether they're ready to vote, what the election is like, something like that. YouTube, sorry for the typo. YouTube provided user with election information panel, breaking news and top news show, to tell information including candidate information and how to vote. So for Twitter, okay, just got informed that the report is actually like it doesn't appear on the website. So please wait a minute. We're trying to fix it in the background. Okay. Here's an example of search prompt on Twitter. So as previously mentioned, so for example, there are some keyword that a Twitter will show the search prompt when the user appear to be searching for elections related words. So this is the search prompt that would appear on their screen during the election period, which they could click on it and then it would link them to the Comelec website. This is the partnership between TikTok and Comelec. For example, they launched the election information project. Yeah. So, okay, the next one is removing content. Removing information disorder and other harmful content. I think that we all know that social media platform, actually all of the chosen social media platform in this report have their community standard and policy on content removal. Whether they apply it is another story. And these policy are also used in the Philippines during the 2022 election. Some of them actually have an initiative that launched specifically for the election. Some of them actually have the initiative that launched specifically for the election, such as Twitter Internal Election Group, comprised of specifically trained staff on local contact. Meta also have the Election Operations Center. And also as part of the removing information disorder and other harmful content, all of them also partner with fact-checking initiative in this case. Next is banning political ad and improving transparency. So actually, TikTok and Twitter and Google banned political ad during the 2022 Philippine election, while Meta did not ban the political ad, but they said that they would improve its transparency. TikTok and Twitter had a default policy that they always ban political ad at the time of the Philippine election in 2022. For Google, even though they usually allow political ad, but they specifically announced that for the 2022 election, they would actually ban it. So actually, this focus on banning political ads or the way or how they would handle it actually started in 2019 actually started in 2019 though, in preparation for the 2020 US presidential election. And it actually like became like a default policy for election elsewhere too, that the social media. So when the social media asked what would they do in preparation for the election, banning political ads or improving the transparency of it seems to be like a default policy elsewhere too. Next is the digital literacy and fostering public engagement. So our social media platform partner with some organization, just state address here in the table, to launch an initiative related to digital literacy as well as to encourage public engagement on issues related to the election. Just like what the table said. Okay, next. Despite the effort that were announced, we actually looking at what really happened in reality when it comes to at the time when the during the elections period. So in the report, you see that we talk about the tactics of information disorder being disseminated first, but we have a limited time here. And in order for you to understand better, it's better for us to talk about the narrative first. So let's start with the narrative. So the problematic narrative, we categorize them into 4 categories as well, which are historical distortion, false achievement endorsement, attacking political rival, and undermining election procedures and the common life itself. So let's look at this first. For the historical distortion, let's talk about the Marcos family a little bit, and also Ferdinand Marcos Sr. before we go further, and for the audience who are not from the Philippines to understand better about this. I refer to him as Marcos Sr. here in the presentation, and he was a president from 1965 until he was ousted from his position by a civilian revolution called People Power Revolution in 1986. Basically, he was a president for around 20 years. That was a long time. At that time, the 1935 Philippine Constitution allowed this to happen. I mean, they allowed the president to run for 2 consecutive terms, comparing to just 1 term right now. And at the end of his 2nd term, he declared martial law, and that's why that's how he's able to keep his power for that long. The administration his administration engaged in a form of crony capitalism, in which business with a close tie to him and his family gained more privilege than other, and together involved in many corruption schemes. The Philippine economy at that time was not going very well, with more than half of the population living under poverty, and the economic growth rate was behind many countries in Southeast Asia region as well, that the Philippines was actually considered as a segment of Asia at that time. Although many infrastructure, so there were a lot of infrastructure being built during the Marcos Senior administration as well. Many of them were actually from foreign loans though, and at the end, put country under great debt. When the martial law was declared, extrajudicial killings by state-affiliated forces were actually common. Many of his political opposition were actually put into jail, and many ordinary citizens were tortured, raped, and killed. That was just common during the time of the martial law. And unfortunately, the attempt to distort the history often made the period of the country under her administration as the golden era. The problematic narrative disseminated to whitewash the history include that their wealth, which is usually described as ill-gotten, as it is from the embezzlement of the state fund, fictitiously claimed that it's from the pre-colonial kingdom called Maharika. It also includes the claim that the basic and important infrastructure that were built during his presidency, while overlooking those infrastructure were funded by the foreign loan. Many actually were built without proper consultation or too luxurious that most people could not really afford to use them. Other narratives include that the country was rich, people lived well during the era. There's also a narrative to justify that the martial law was necessary to actually tackle the communists and that the people power revolution was an evil plan to topple the administration of Marcos Sr., who said to be a president who truly cared for the country. Yeah. Next is the Marcos Jr. for achievement and endorsement. The popular narrative here that we analyze from the database of the fact-checking initiative is that so we go back to Marcos Jr. here. It's about his four achievement and endorsement, which include the four claim that he's an Oxford graduate, he's a principal author of several law, in particular the Republic Act number 9522 or the Philippine Baseline Law, which define the Philippine Sea Territory, and that the first wind farm in Southeast Asia, Bangui Wind Farm in Ilocos Norte is his project. Fourth claim that his candidacy for the presidential office were endorsed by many public figures were also went viral on social media. And also his election campaign rally were usually made bigger than the reality in terms of the attendance. Okay, so next is the attacking political rival. Filipino knows that Marcos Jr. contested for the vice presidency back in 2016, and he lost to Leni Robredo by a slim margin of about 200,000 votes, and he claimed that the vice presidency was actually stolen from him. Well, it happened that the two contested the British order again in 2022 election, and it appeared that Robredo became the biggest victim of information disorder here. She was painted as incompetent and unintelligent. Her quote was constantly misquoted. She was also falsely claimed to have a close tie with the communists. Her personal life was actually dug out as well. And even her daughter became a victim of a fabricated sex video. Yeah, this is the problematic narrative that we found. Also, the last one was about attacking COMELEC and election procedure. The next category, this one. So Marcos Jr. has actually always been vocal about the error in the use of the Smartmatic system, which is an automated electronic system in the Philippine election used for vote counting. This is stemmed from his claim that vice presidency was actually stolen from him in 2016. It was found that it was found by Rappler, an independent news media in the Philippines, that his supporter disseminated information disorder about the election procedure during the election period. With an aim for people, with the aim for people to distrust the process. There was also a report by the Manila Bulletin that claimed that COMELEC data was leaked, even though many have questions the report methodology. It's not known exactly though what was the purpose, like why the supporter of Marcos Jr. wanted to try to discredit the election procedure and the COMELEC itself. But given the situation, it looks like this type of problematic narrative is part of the preparation in the case that him losing the 2022 election, if he happened to lose. Yeah. So next, let's go to the tactics. Okay, the next thing that we would like to talk about is how this problematic narrative spread. Back in the previous election in the Philippines, there were studies that the dissemination of information disorder and other problematic content are actually in a form of network. And I think that JM would actually like emphasize this later, if he's able to, yeah. And in 2022, according to the research architect of network disinformation, it is still a network. However, it evolved in the way that those bad actors have become more official and credential instead of just like a cheap online troll in the previous election. This means that when these people who are more official and credential said something that are problematic, false, fake, misleading, what they said became more creditable in terms of making people believe it. Let's take a look at some example of this. Okay, many sources that we review uncover that there was like a partisan new ecosystem on social media that disseminate problematic content like altogether. This include like the official YouTube channels of the religious organization in the Philippines, Sunshine Media Network International (SMNI), government-owned PTV, Marcos Jr. own channel and official media like a channel of the celebrity Tony Gonzaga, um, former news anchor Irving Toffo. The narrative of these channels reflect and amplify the problematic narrative that were mentioned earlier. There are also some academics here as well, like here Professor Khalida Carlos, who used to be a former professor at UP Diliman, talking to Sassasauce here. Also, there's political analyst Antonio Contreras. You see the source, right? He even like got featured in the CNN Philippines, and that's why it's problematic here. I want to talk about Marcos Jr. personal vlog a little bit. So he created his personal channel in November 2009, and at first, it was primarily used as a mean of providing coverage of his event, interview, and press conference. However, after he was defeated in the 2016 election, he became particularly active on it. He launched his own personal vlog in 2018 and used it to show his personal side, including his life as a husband and father, as well as his hobby and interest. We talk about this later about this. Apart from the channel and bad actor behind it, let's actually talk about the way social media platform operate have played the role in disseminating disinformation too. What make it different this time is a short video platform, TikTok, which play important role in the election for the first time. Why is this important? I think Celine knows well about this as a fact checker. When it comes to a video, it's harder to fact check compared to text and photo, especially when it's live. When it's in the video, it's also about nonverbal languages. Given that 67.9% of the Filipino aged from 16 to 64 consider TikTok as the most used social media platform, and half of the registered voters belong to the youth demographic. This means that a short video platform is now the principal format for the dissemination of problematic content. The way that the algorithm work, the way that TikTok algorithm work is also an issue. According to its official paper, it's designed to get people addicted, with the algorithm being well designed to serve people content that they will be interested. Its function also allow the content to be shared easily across platform. And this way, the problematic narrative can exist longer. We will talk more about this later. Also, apart from the content in the short video format, many research actually confirm that the format that problematic narrative was disseminated is in the form of meme. It's used everywhere. The problem with it is that it's harder to regulate. For example, Comelec did regulate the use of political ad in the use of ad in its resolution. However, while many might think that the ads will be a big issue, will be a big problem, it is in fact like everything all together. It's actually very highly dynamic here. Okay, we're going to analysis here. So let's look at a social media platform. I just put this slide so that you are reminded of the social media platforms again, that is divided into 4 categories. To explain this, and we compare the reality, the what happened with the effort. So okay, the first one, first, social media platform have directed audience to authoritative and accurate information for election procedure. However, they actually overlook the dynamic of the situation, as previously mentioned. Comelec and the election procedure, particularly the Smartmatic system, were attacked with information disorder. However, the authoritative content that social media platform link the audiences to as a result of the partnership between them and the entity, particularly Comelec, did not evolve with the situation. Like we saw that why bad actor attacked the Smartmatic system and discredit the election procedure, limited effort actually have been seen publicly regarding to the partnership between social media platform and Comelec to correct the information. Next is removing content. So let's talk about the effort to remove problematic content by social media platform. Many sources that we review show evidences that information disorder and other problematic narrative by the macroses were actually accumulated. It was years in the making. When those content are disseminated in the form of a network and went viral across the platform, it's actually hardly possible that taking it down as the only single approach to combat information disorder would work effectively. This is because it can resurface very quickly. You can also see this narrative from, you can also see this narrative from one account on TikTok, and in the next 10 minutes, you get to see the same narrative again from the other account on Facebook Reels. In this case, it's hardly to be about it's hardly to be about content moderation alone. There's also a concern about lack of transparency and consistency, as some of the problematic content was flagged for the social media platform. However, they were still not removed after they have been flagged. Moreover, this is really important actually. We know that the effort for the Marcoses to return to the highest office were years in the making, right? As part of the propaganda for them to achieve their goal. So as part of the propaganda, the content is not just disinformation, misinformation, or like an attacking narrative that are considered as hate speech. There are also subtle hidden messages, or we call it here as a borderline content. This kind of content actually cannot be categorized with anything. It's not disinformation, not misinformation or hate speech, but it's still part of the propaganda. Let's take a look at it. So here, he tried to rebrand himself as a loving family man. This is the first example of his personal, this is part of actually part of his personal vlog, making himself appear as a family man who likes to spend time with his family, 3 sons here. You can see that this type of narrative is actually not categorized as information disorder or even hate speech, but still is a part of the effort to rebrand the reputation of the family. Look at the son on the right. This is his eldest son. This is not featured in the report, but I actually want to point it out here. So another example, but it's still important actually. So the son on the right, is Marcos Jr. oldest son, Ferdinand Marcos III, or Sandro Marcos. He was actually very popular among young girls during the elections period, and he's actually a political heir to the Marcoses. Even his name tells it all. In the 2022 election, he was also elected as the representative of Ilocos Norte, the family political stronghold. And because like his popularity among young girls and even Marcos Jr. jokingly call him as like TikTok heartthrob. So like you see here, don't know whether I consume it. Okay. Here there's a lot of like a video like this that popularized him on actually social media. This is from TikTok though. Like, okay, find a man who loves his mom as much as his life. See the comment, future president of the Philippines. This is actually inaugural address when he was elected as a representative of Ilocos Norte though. Wait. Okay, here. So the narrative like this by, young girls, by young fan were actually like very popular across social media. And it's actually a very interesting fact though. It's different layers here. Because he's actually groomed to be a political ad, and this may be used to weaponize later as in order to get to the top office, you need a political strong base. Um, you need a strong base of fans, sorry. And there's also an attempt by the supporter to link him with the youngest daughter of Duterte as well, Kitty Duterte. You see a lot of this on social media if you search for it, actually. Anyway, the this kind of content is actually, when it comes to borderline content, is actually still a matter of debate. The line between content that needs to be removed or and borderline content is still blur. Still, as you can see, it's still a matter of concern as its toxicity can influence public opinion. Removing it can be considered as excessive and harmful to freedom of expression. So that's why it's actually challenging. Let's go back to meme. We know that when it comes to content moderation, platforms use artificial intelligence to help them with this. However, meme is challenging to remove because it's a combination of photo and text all together in one image. And that's why it's hard for AI to detect. In 2020, Meta did admit that meme are extremely challenging for machine because it means that AI cannot just analyze the text and the image separately. Same with the short format video on TikTok. It's harder to detect given nonverbal languages in the video as well. Also, the Philippines is really diverse in terms of culture and languages. Therefore, human moderation might be a better answer, but realistically, the amount of content is in high volume. Using human moderation alone would be really challenging. We don't have like information about how social media platform handling content moderation in the Philippines specifically though, like how many staff do they have? Anyway, that's just one issue. Okay, next, banning political ads and improving its transparency. Okay, let's move to the third effort. Well, we can conclude it here that even though the platform like TikTok, Twitter, and Google chose to ban the app because the narrative were disseminated in the form of dynamic network and also with the way the algorithm work, the toxic narrative found a way to reach wider audiences anyway without it having to be an ad. So here we made, this is actually infographic that we use in the report as well, banning and not banning. The only platform in this research that we know that it didn't ban the app is Facebook. Well, let's look at some record here. I want to actually focus on Facebook because as the only platform that allow ad to happen here in this case. Okay, in this slide, you see that Marcos Jr. See the red line. Okay. Marcos Jr. actually spent the most at over 600 million peso for the election. However, he didn't actually spend much on Facebook as the only platform that allow political ad and also still the most popular social media platform in the Philippines. The number represents some interesting fact actually. Here. As you see, he didn't spend much on Facebook ad. Yeah, he didn't spend much on Facebook ad. And here. And well, He has only two ads actually, which were advertised full time, two each. And it's actually pretty general. It was just like a video inviting people to vote on the election. This is interesting when information disorder that benefit him went viral on every social media platform. We can conclude here that it's not necessary that the politicians themselves to spread toxic narrative in the form of ad. However, we see many of the problematic narrative on Facebook that benefit Marcos Jr. in the form of ad that didn't come directly from him. Okay, here is the first example. This is actually also in the report. Well, you see the captions here, tiger and eagle. So it's actually pro Marcos narrative. So it said that the angels in heaven are cheering for Marcos Jr., referred to here as BBM, as a leader of our country. Chosen by God, whether or not you have to submit it. All right, next one. Actually, this one is actually not like a kind of borderline, but it's controversial because it's actually a video of a controversial blogger Mahalika. She has many content that are considered as controversial. And this is actually an ad up here on Facebook. Yeah, and in this video, she interviewed a former representative, Mike Defensor, who actually talked about how good Marcos is, something like that. Yeah, next is, Salvador Panelo. He was a chief presidential legal counsel and presidential spokesperson during the tenure of Rodrigo Duterte. So this is, on the left one is actually the details of the ad. On the right one is actually the full detail. So this is actually an ad on Facebook. So to summarize it, it's about it's about the people power revolution. Next, this one is about the speaker from the Sambayanan party list. Well, at the 4 minute 30 seconds mark, he actually talked that Robredo and Pansilinan, her running mate as a vice presidency, were meeting Joma Sison, who's the founder of the Communist Party of the Philippines. Yeah, so yes, all of these are actually out on Facebook though, and you can look at the amount of this is actually from the Facebook library. You can look at when it was active, the period when it was active, which platform it spread. This is Facebook. Estimate of audience, the piece that the estimate audience sizes, how many, the estimations of the estimation of audience that the ad reach every time that it advertised, and the amount is spent on the ad, how much impressions that it got. Anyway, Facebook got paid for it though. Next is digital literacy and public engagement. Limited information. Well, overall, we have a really limited public information on the matter. We actually send email to the social media platform representative to ask about what it's like after the election regarding the digital literacy and public engagement. We didn't get much regarding to like the long-term approaches on these matters. And we think that is actually important for the platform to address what they are trying to achieve in the long term on the initiative. Milestone, what are the lessons learned, and whether what they want to continue in the long term. Yeah, I think that, we think that without this kind of, issues, without this kind of element being clearly addressed, the effort can easily be considered as a PR stunt. Well, Ashley, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you so much on this. So next we'll move to the commentator section. I will invite Fatima Gaur to talk about this first, and then it will be JM, and then followed by Celine. Uh, Fatima, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ploy, and congratulations to Digital Reach for this report, for publishing it. I know the election has been, more than a year, but the effects of, the election of Marcos winning the presidency is still very much felt by the Filipinos, I think, with the economic crisis, political scandals, and whatnot. Um, Secondly, I want to echo the findings of the report that social media has indeed been the electoral battleground since 2016 to 6 years forward in 2022. But I think what the important finding to highlight is that the platforms have not been able to respond to the scale and the scope of the strategies and the operations used to manipulate the public opinion. So while the platforms are doing something, it's not enough. And what I want to offer as like comments for today's report is some nuance to expound, not only to highlight that the platforms are not doing enough, and it's never enough to address the real issues, but also my perspective is that there's a problem solution mismatch. That's why the efforts done by the platforms is not enough, or it's not impactful in this context. So the first thing I want to talk about is how the platforms really talk about election integrity policy coming from a very global north perspective, in terms of like content moderation or any other like initiatives that guide all their efforts. So while in the report there were findings that the Marcos supporters were campaigning to sow doubt in the integrity of the election, it's not really the main crux of the campaign or disinformation influence operation campaign of the Marcoses, as the report have shown. It's not really the most compelling narrative of all the social media narratives out there. And this like framework of like tackling election integrity, voter suppression is very much from the framework of the United States, of like the January 6th insurrection, Donald Trump Stop the Steal campaign. So that framework of how they police, or like how they moderate content in the Philippine election is not really um, matching the context that we have, and it's not really addressing the real a problem of election integrity in the Philippines. So I think what the platforms need to do is redefine what they think election integrity means in the context of the Philippines and Southeast Asia more broadly. Philippines is just one context where the political parties are not really clear, right? Indonesia is the same. Well, to a lesser extent, Malaysia is the same. Cambodia, all of the other countries in the region doesn't have the same political system as their Western counterparts. So we need to not blindly transpose those Western content moderation framework to the Philippines or any other country in this other side of the world. The other thing I want to point out is how platforms talk about, their identifying coordinated inauthentic campaigns, right, in the context of election. But what I would want to share in my experience and research, I've done 2 election research for the Philippines last time. I'm gonna link the reports here because some of my colleagues from the Philippines who I work with are also here. A lot of these campaigns are really not coordinated, or coordinated maybe, but coordination might be a weaker measure or indicator. There are, other things they're doing, other strategies that are more gray and ambiguous that still counts as, manipulative, and is more ingrained in the digital public sphere. So similar to the finding of the Digital Reach report and our finding from the Philippine Media Monitoring Laboratory, that Marcos and Duterte's digital manipulation infrastructure has been there for years. And when, of course, it's election season, people are all out, let's, monitor election content. Let's police election manipulation content. But it's been there for a while. So it's not necessarily coordinated anymore. It's more of cultivated. The communities that, find these narratives resonant have been primed long ago. And, Ploy mentioned like the TikTok communities already targeted by these messages are not, haven't been targeted per se, but they've been, tagged by the algorithm as somewhat interested in this topic of Sandro Marcos, for example, or the Marcos family story more generally. So for me, that the interventions that assume coordination is just one aspect of it. That there are many other indicators in terms of like quantitative measures, other like indicators that does it hold for a majority of how people interact with this content. So it's more of a prolonged interaction with propaganda that might need to be, considered by platforms. And the last thing I want to say is how platforms in general, in terms of their promise to accountability, is performative and often doesn't address the problem directly. So I think JM would also mention this concept of like, introducing the idea of influence operation and moving away from disinformation as a concept. Because as Floy mentioned, it's not just disinformation and misinformation, but all the gray area that doesn't really fall into clear categories. And a lot of influence operation or proxy operation, meaning it's not the candidate doing the dirty work, it's somebody else. Like they hire covert, communication, campaign teams to do their bidding. So like for me, the banning of political ads doesn't really make sense. I know it's an international thing, but for me, it just pushed people to go to the black market, not black market, but like underground operation, because political ads are not available for them. So for me, it just worsened the context. And lastly, for me, I'm not really sold on like how platforms claim accountability when in fact they're outsourcing accountability to fact checkers like Verifels, or to news to nonprofit organization. They fund, yes, lots of money is involved. But they don't have a native, policy. And a lot of the local policy managers are doing more monitoring and not really have like a say in the policy, framework or approach of the platform specific to the countries that we're tackling here, in Philippines and Southeast Asia more broadly. So that's, I think, my key perspective, and I'm excited to hear what my co-commentators have to say.
JM, can I invite you to talk, please?
Okay, thanks, Fatima, and thank you again, Digital Reach, Floy, Pat, and congratulations again on your report. My colleague Fatima had already talked about the global north facing policies being incompatible with global south context, and I very much agree. In fact, Fatima and I will be in Brazil next week to participate in a south to south learning and sharing workshop. So I wanted to contribute to this conversation by talking about three different points. First, I wanted to uh, give recognition to this report because it is important to write about, to republish Marcosian history given the current state of affairs in the Philippines. So if you read the report, there are actually around 11 pages, I think, of martial law history. And I urge students, academics, civil society organizations, journalists to continue to write about it, publish about it, republish it, because this can help. One of the core narratives being marshaled during the 2022 elections is that the Marcoses were victims of liberal democracy. So that narrative of false victimhood, rewriting about Marcosian history can help address that. We're currently studying a comparison of anti-disinformation responses in Brazil and the Philippines. And one thing that contributed to Brazil's electoral victory last year was a very active, very watchdog media and a very active civil society organization sector consistently and aggressively correcting historical distortions along with disinformation. So yeah, that first point, definitely a big need. My second point is I wanted to express how I very much agree with how advertising regulations are insufficient. So this is mostly because of the nature of the disinformation content itself, where much of the content isn't or can't be categorized as advertisements anyway or ads anyway, right? So that's part of how network disinformation operations circumvent the rules. That's why it's called influence operations, as Fatima mentioned earlier. So when Ploy also mentioned earlier that some propagandists now are more credentialed, one famous example that comes to mind, aside from the ones shown earlier, is a video skit series in the Facebook account of Senator Amy Marcos herself, the sister of President Bongbong Marcos. In this video skit series, they're sort of caricaturing opposition candidate Lenny Robredo, and it contains a lot of narratives, a lot of discourses that point to disinformative narratives from the previous years. So it creates recall. That's what it does. So it's not disinformative per se, but it creates recall processes. And since that's less an advertisement and more a skit in form, right? It enters this gray area of allowable content where platforms aren't incentivized to be decisive or to be the ones to initiate a takedown. And I would even argue that we might not want them to anyway, because we would be surrendering more power to platforms. So another side of that call of making platforms, making institutions stronger, is the call in the Philippines for institutions like the Commission on Elections or the Supreme Court to have stronger regulatory and interventionist powers. This was a very loud narrative during and after the 2022 elections. And drawing again from our comparative study, Brazil has such an institution, the Superior Electoral Court of Brazil. That court was able to pressure platforms to provide certain transparency tools only available in the global north, or to ban entire content genres during the campaign period. Like they weren't allowed, I think they restricted one platform from publishing any content about the 2018 elections. Yeah. So that idea of a strong institution seems to be very attractive for us in the Philippines. But now our colleagues in Brazil are also discussing about how to regulate that power and make sure that it's not abused, because that would lead to further distrust in our political institutions. So right now, that distrust is already being exploited in the Philippines. I recently co-wrote a chapter on how the Marcos camp exercised controlled interactivity online. They're choosing who to respond to, who to not respond to, by bypassing legacy media in their campaign and leveraging personal social media in their campaign. So it's difficult to imagine platforms like Facebook, Meta, Twitter, TikTok taking down these accounts without lending legitimacy to the conspiracist claim that all media are biased. So that makes it more dangerous, right? So I'm bringing all of this up to say that we should want transparent and inclusive decision-making processes, not simply stronger institutions. We need to account for social political contexts. And in the Philippines, elite capture and impunity complicate calls for stronger institutions. Yeah, so again, ad policies, much like most of our regulatory frameworks in elections, are not enough. But making them stronger is not as obvious of an answer as we think it is. And my last point is, while this report clearly shows where and how platforms fell short in their responsibility to ensure good quality information ecosystems and how they became complicit in the process, I also urge people to ensure that when we perform our anti-disinformation advocacies, we do not fall into the convenient discourse of platform determinism, of tech determinism, where we blame everything on the platforms, right? We can call out platforms for their complicity, but we must not be confused by the fact that there are real actors outside of platforms that are making sure the prerequisite infrastructure for disinformation for hire is retained and made profitable. So the Marcos Historical Distortion Project, for example, it started way before platforms were mainstream. It was started in the 1990s, right? So what institutions enabled that to create long-term sensibilities in the public that were just waiting to be tapped and were successfully tapped during this previous elections, 2 rounds of elections. So while platforms may be a new feature of modern societies, the problems of our democracy are old and not alien at all. So let's make sure that we punch up. And when we punch up, we do this by holding accountable the actors who make it possible for platforms to be complicit and to be used as tools against democracy. So that's it for me. Maybe Chin can add.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Fatima, and thank you, JM. Um, I'd like to read the reaction I prepared actually for this study. Verifiles commends this critical work of digital reach that underscores the importance of engaging with social media platforms to curb the spread of information disorders. The study also correctly highlighted that addressing innovations by bad actors to muddle the minds of the public needs an array of approaches involving multiple stakeholders. The platforms or social media platforms are only one of many people and groups with whom we need to engage in this battle for the truth. In our experience and observation as fact checkers, people will wreak havoc if they want to wreak havoc. Bad actors will create information disorders, whether their motivation be financial or ideological. But this doesn't mean that it's impossible to limit its reach, or nor is it impossible to inoculate the public against falsehoods. The study highlighted the insidious effect of cross posting or spreading the same piece of content across multiple social media platforms. It also emphasized how disinformation is networked in the Philippines. Both cross posting and network disinformation essentially prolong the shelf life of misinformation and disinformation on the internet. By spreading its reach in the thousands and at times millions across multiple platforms, disinformation becomes pervasive. It becomes ubiquitous in the apps that people open and use every day. Digital Reach's study highlights the need for social media platforms to take more stringent policies against proven misinformation and disinformation. Even doing this on one critical social media platform could have a ripple effect on others. This study actually reminds me of a report done in 2021 by the New York University Center of Social Media and Politics. So a month after the 2020 US presidential election, YouTube took down videos that promoted the unfounded theory that widespread errors and fraud changed the outcome of the US elections. So they took down those videos. A day after the US Capitol riots on January 6, 2021, YouTube also YouTube also introduced the policy where those who violate the election misinformation policy would get a strike, and those who get 3 strikes in 90 days would be permanently removed from YouTube. So the NYU study observed a spillover effect. So there were significant drops in the shares of false and misleading election-related videos on Facebook and Twitter in the US after YouTube introduced more stringent policies against harmful election misinformation. So claims of election fraud or cheating during the election is a tune Filipinos know all too well. It persists nearly after every election. And in fact, one claim that Verifiles fact-checked multiple times a year from 2016 to 2022 was the claim that Ferdinand Marcos Jr., or the current president, was cheated out of the vice presidential race by Leni Robredo. This is a claim that Ploy also highlighted in the recap earlier. So this makes me think if the same stringent policies if the same stringent policies in the US were also implemented in the Philippines, there probably would have been a difference made in the quality of information that people were consuming through social media on the topic. So if there's anything that the 2022 elections taught us, it is to listen to the public and be where they are. The study correctly highlighted how short form videos such as TikTok videos and Reels have quickly become king of content. Studies like the one launched by Digital Reach today validate the same trends we have observed in the past 7 years we have done fact checking. Studies like this help inform our approaches on how to deliver facts, not just during the elections, but every day as Filipinos consume information online. So this study will serve as one of the references and guides in how we can and must prepare for the 2025 and 2028 Philippine elections. And if there's anything to glean from the study today, it is that we must start now. Thank you.
Thank you, Celine. Thank you so much. We have one questions here. I'll answer it and then we can conclude and end the event. So this question is from Shirley. According to view from JM, with all of the findings shown in this report, what is the next plan of CR Coalition to engage with social media companies and some potential change? So after we launched the 5 report series, we will launch a regional report to actually find the identical trend among all the 5 case study that we we conduct. And after this, there's actually a plan in 2026 2026 to actually establish CAC as a permanent program within digital reach. So actually we have 14 members organization here as part of the coalition. So we are actually planning to actually establish it as a permanent program that comprises of research and advocacy within digital reach to actually work on this. Yeah. Also, you asked about how to engage with social media company. This is actually pretty challenging though, because I know that many organizations actually have tried to engage with social media company. And usually they're not that really willing to engage. And a lot of time, the answer to question, especially house question, would be they would try to be diplomatic in the best possible way that they can. And usually you don't really get much from them. So we try different approaches from on this regarding to advocacy. Yeah, we'll think about it later. Yeah. And I think that's it. Well, I think that I will conclude here that it's really challenging to get rid of problematic content that surround the Marcos family, given the dynamic of the propaganda. Social media, in fact, I would like to highlight it here that social media, in fact, is not solely responsible of what happened. Of course, there's many layers and factors that contributed to the situation that made them being able to return to the highest office. Weak governance is one of them. They have never really been tried by any court for the crime that they have committed, except for the corruption either. The fact that Marcos Sr. died in the US resulted in him not being held accountable for the crime, as well as the Duterte administration still allow his body to be buried in a cemetery that reserved for war hero and eminent individuals. And however, it's undeniable that social media platform did play an important role to actually help the Marcoses return to power, back to the highest office. And since 2016, the situation of weaponizing social media platform to manipulate the election has become a political playbook now. In the Philippine politics, as the Marcoses return to power, it's a slap in the face of many victims during the martial law and the victim of his administration. It's proof that social media platforms do have an ability to manipulate democratic procedure of a nation. Philippines is actually a very obvious case study here among all the research that we conduct on social media platform accountability at the moment. And if the social media wants to do more, they have to understand the dynamic of the situation first, and the effort will have to be a long-term effort, not just some effort superficially announced period shortly to the election, because you see that the problem is also actually with the way that they operate as well. And yeah, what we found, they proved that if the Philippines was dubbed as in 2016 as the patient zero by the Facebook executive, things apparently didn't change much in 2022, and it will continue if there's nothing changed, at least for the social media accountability. Okay, I'm going to end the event here. Thank you so much for participating. Hopefully we'll see you in the next event. Thank you so much for all the commentator. Bye.